super excited to introduce Maarten here to you guys. If you don't know about his work already, we're sort of finishing off with another great local Belgian artist. Um, so yeah, I think with that said, let's just dive right in. Maarten, if you're ready to go, we're ready to go too. So I
Yeah,
would
sure.
say, take it away.
Okay, I'll jump full screen now. Hey guys, well, I'm Maarten Verhoeven. I'm a digital sculptor, and I'm really thankful for the guys at DAC-ANT for asking me to give a little talk about the stuff that I do. And I want to analyze or tell you like how I approach my work and where I come from as an artist and how I've grown over the years. So here we go. My my thing is called an anatomy of nightmares because a lot of people always think that my work's very scary, um, but I don't feel that it's like that at all. It's an approach of seeing things and visualizing things that evoke emotion instead of always pure horror and scary images. So where do I come from? This kind of looks like a scene out of a horror movie, but my origin starts. I grew up in a garage. My parents, my family were car salesmen, and the thing is, like, they had nothing artistic running around in the background. So when I started drawing when I was a kid, around 5 years old or so, like I was looking for stuff to get inspired. And the great thing when I go back to that period, because I'm, let's say, a child of the 80s, there was like this magical place where I always went to as when I was a kid, and that was called a video store. And even like in our little town where I grew up in, um, with the spare money that I saved up, I drove off to the video store every time and rented the movie. But there was like this certain moment um, when I wasn't able to go, and my mom decided to pick up a video. And let's call this a surprise VHS tape. And the thing is, like, that thing really scarred me for the rest of my life, I would say. And what was on that tape was this Gremlins. Until this day, like, this movie really influenced me as an artist, as a kid. And it's kind of like a red line running around in the back of everything that I create, and let's say my passion and my love for creatures. And like when you see this movie as a kid, like this guy is cute. You don't have any problems looking at this guy, but this guy will give you total nightmares. And that's the thing that, let's say, scarred me for life as as a creative person. And the great thing, like back in the day, like there were many more, and let's say many more of these followed me. And as you can see, like when you see these things as a kid, like it's this magical place that takes you back to your childhood, and you think like, how are these things created? So I wanted to make monsters somehow, and it was really hard to figure out like what were the possibilities when I was growing up. So when I was growing up, I was thinking like, maybe I should find a VFX education. But the problem is, like, looking back in the period of the 80s and the 90s in Belgium, like there wasn't anything like that on the market. So I was like kind of trying to figure out my roots. I was able to make sure that everything um, worked out while I was studying. So I kind of figured out a trail. Like if I would study classic arts and maybe animation, because I saw already the beginning of 3D animation coming up. So I saw the possibility, like there might be a slight chance that even with animation, like I'll be able to create monsters. And that's kind of how I, let's say, followed my whole study course. And the thing is, like, what happens, like when you're graduate, you come out of the street and things like I followed uh, 3D animation and classical animation. But the thing was, like, when I graduated, like,
Hi, Martin. Sorry to interrupt you, but would it
yeah,
be possible to lower down the volume of your system?
yeah, sure.
Because we
Wait,
heard all the plops from Discord coming in.
okay, wait, that's weird. 2 seconds.
No problem.
Um, let's hope this is better.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Okay, so I was trying to figure out like what now when I was graduated, because in my education, like I was more, let's say, focused on doing everything yourself and not being trained to work into a studio. So the thing was like I went looking around to find a job, found a little position in a post-production house, and there I was color grading, doing small motion graphics and everything, and still doing animation. But the thing was like I was missing my creatures and my monsters and everything. And luckily, like there was one day that I actually bought a magazine, and that magazine had like a big sheet in it, and it was a commercial for ZBrush. And I saw like an image created by Rick Baker, and I was looking at it and I was thinking like, this isn't what I left behind when I was studying 3D. Because when I was studying 3D, it was like in 2000, and that was more, let's say, point modeling and box modeling. And that thing that I saw in 2009, I think, that was more organic. That felt like clay. That felt like super organic. And I was thinking like, this is awesome. Like I could create my let's say the things that I was doing the whole time when I was growing up, like drawing and playing with clay and everything. And I could, let's say, add it into a digital realm. And like when I started playing with ZBrush, I fell in love directly. And this kind of triggered me to study the whole thing. And like I stayed up like super late in the evenings. Like I got up at 6 o'clock in the morning, then started sculpting, looking at tutorials. I was sculpting until 8 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock. Then I went to my day job. Then when I got back at 6 or 7 in the evening, like I quickly ate something and then I started working again until 12 o'clock. And I did that for 3 months straight. And the good thing is like, because of ZBrush, that it's so intuitive, like you feel that you're learning pretty fast. And also like when you have a background with drawing and sculpting, like this helps you along pretty fast. And the nice thing, like I was doing it for I would say 6 months as a hobby, sharing some stuff online. And I actually got offered my first, let's say, job possibility. And I went to my previous boss and I asked him like, is there a possibility for me to freelance on the side? Because like stepping into a whole new realm of 3D sculpting and let's say the international markets, and you're only working from Belgium and you don't know anybody, it's hard to figure out like, if I will jump into the deep end, like will this work for me? And like I was discussing it with my boss, and he was telling me like, look, guy, if you want to try it, just do it. Just jump into the deep end. If you want to be a big boy, give up everything and try it. And I was saying like, yeah, okay. If you say that's the route that I have to take, I'll give it a shot. But it might be stupid that I did it at that moment. But in hindsight, like it was for me a good decision, because I gave up everything for one single job that provided me, like, let's say, with 1 day of work. So I gave up my whole steady career and yeah, tried to figure out like if this thing would be the right trail. And you know, like even when it's like when I started professional, it starts small. Like for instance, like this is an example of all the stuff that I did over the years. And it's quite different than my personal work, because like a lot of people don't really know my professional work. But as you can see here, like in the top left corner, you see a bottle. Like I've done a lot of glass work and glass designs for bottles. And it's super fun to do because you need a lot of technical skills and technical aspects to get yourself into that industry. I did a lot of gaming stuff, toy designs. I did some awards, some jewels, some VFX stuff still for companies, some statues. Like that's the great thing on being a digital sculptor, or let's say digital sculptor / concept sculptor. Like you're quite often in the beginning of a development stage, and like you have a certain responsibility to give a visual look to what you're creating, and that's super fun to do. But the nice thing about being a digital sculptor is like you can use your skill set for a lot of different aspects. Like you can go towards concept art, 3D modeling for games, VFX, and 3D printing, or rapid prototyping. And if you look at the little gun that's practically in the middle of the screen, like that's actually the first assignment that I ever got approached for. That was actually for Hasbro toys, and that was a little gun created for GI Joe figures, like the toy figures. And for me, that was like a small dream come true, like being able to create the stuff that you played with as a kid. And let's say from that moment on, like different possibilities came along on the route, and people always ask me like, could you do this? Could you try that? And I'm always thinking like, if the project's interesting enough for me, like I'll be able to, or I'm willing to talk about it, you know, and figure out like how I can help them visualize or let's say create the product that you're looking for. And sometimes like when you're working for toys or collectibles, like the design is already set in stone, kind of, you know, like they give you a concept piece. But if you're, let's say, more into the concepting phase, you get a lot of liberties, and also people trust you. Like they give you the responsibility to figure out like how things are created, how things are being put together, and so on. So the other things that you can see on this slide is, for instance, like the Statue of the Walking Dead, some stuff that I did for the Star Wars collectibles, and like even a little dinosaur skull that was actually for somebody who wanted to have a museum replica. And what I did was like I went for a ton of stock images and everything and photographs of that certain type of skull, and I just reproduced it one-on-one. And the fun thing about this thing is like, even though it's like created on my computer, like that thing was 3D printed, like 1.60 m long, you know, like a one-to-one scale skull. So that's super fun to work on these projects. And even with other artists, like the artist that's, let's say, hugging the statue that's in the right bottom. She's actually a children's book illustrator, and she has like a very naive drawing style, but she asked me like if there's a possibility to translate her work into a 3D object, and it was 3D printed, and she hand painted it, so it had the same look and feel, of course, than the images that she has in her book. So that's kind of like a small summary of the stuff that I do as a professional sculptor or artist. But I'm here to, let's say, more talk about my work and how I approach things, and also show you guys like a small breakdown in 3 steps, like how I approach different types of sculpting, you know. So let's jump on to the next one. Personal work. Personal work is for me very important. Like I kind of chose to be a freelance artist because like that also gives me the possibility to work on my own stuff. Like I have so many ideas that I want to put forward into, let's say, my fictive imaginary world. And being a freelance artist, like you can manage your schedule a tiny bit more to being able to work on your own project. And I would always say, like, when I look at my stuff, I always say like there's symbolism in design and storytelling. Like with everything that I create that you can find on my portfolio or everything, like there's always like certain elements that come back that tell a story for me. Like even when I create something, let's call it scary, for me it's super important to figure out like what's the backstory, where does he come from, where does he live, why is he here, and not just make a pretty picture, you know. And what I did was like I went looking at a lot of work that I was creating, and what I saw was like different elements always came back for me. And I don't know, like I try to. It's like super weird because like you make a lot of stuff over the years, and then you like step back out of your out of the place where you are as an artist, and you look at your work and you try to figure out like why am I using these things? Why like trying to explain the whole workaround, like. Why does your brain being triggered like the stuff that you do? And what I saw like in my work, like a lot of classical signs and symbols like spirals always comes back. Like it's ancient. It's something that the first caveman has been drawing on their caves, and it's like something supernatural for me while I'm sculpting to add all these little details in everything. And with the black, like black gives a certain deepness and texture to the stuff that I create. And for some people, like it's scary, like it's darkness. But for other people, like it kind of gives like a certain ease and calmness. And the same thing for the red. For some people, red is scary, and for other people, red means love and passion. And the other thing that always comes back with me is like gold elements and certain symbols. Like jewelry, because it kind of evokes like some kind of like there's a history behind the character, you know. Like if even when you create a creature and you add a few coins or a few bits of jewelry, you kind of implement that there's like a civilization behind it, and that's kind of stuff that always kind of comes back in my personal work when I'm not, let's say, being inspired by fan art or something else. So this is like a very simple example, like the Anubis piece that I did a few years ago. It's been created in ZBrush, put into Keyshot, then I did some post-production stuff on it in Photoshop. It's fairly simple. And the nice thing about it is like symbols or the same things come back, like the gold is in there. And yeah, like for me, like creating stuff like this is like a walk through the park. Like it's like I have an idea and I just put it out there. Like that's also the thing that I don't do. Like I don't sketch out stuff on paper as a designer. Like I jump into ZBrush and I explore shapes. And quite often I know in advance in which direction I'm going to go. Like I will never, let's say, stand behind a canvas or a blank screen in this case and be like, oh, let's create something cool. No, like I'm already figuring out in my head, like, I want to create this because of this and this and this reason. Like it's all growing always in the back of my head, and then I jump forward and then I put it onto the screen. This was actually like a simple iteration because I was trying out different things with it. Like, okay, what would it look like with an open mouth, slit mouth, and it's just like it's a sketch, you know. Like I don't spend more than 6 hours or so on a piece like this. It's just like getting stuff out of there. For me, like it's way more important to throw stuff on the screen as an artist than being able to work on a piece for a few weeks. Like if I'm on a production, sadly enough, like I love to work in a team, but quite often when I'm starting to work in a production and let's say a certain chain, like for me, the story is quite often told within a day and a half. And then the other 2 weeks, like I'm still working for that company, still, let's say, making adjustments and iterations and everything. But for me, let's say the fun is gone because like I want to throw the stuff out there, you know? And it's the same thing with this guy. Like this guy, I have an idea, I sculpt him out in a few hours time. It's very simple. I throw it in Keyshot. And what I do is like I take 1, maybe 2, 3 render passes. That's it. Tiny bit of texture in ZBrush, and then I'll compile everything together and just make a nice, pretty picture. But for instance, like I also try to trigger myself, and sometimes let's say do a portrait or something. You know, like it's very important as a 3D sculptor to know where you come from, like your anatomy, your proportions, and everything. Like even when you create all those fancy creatures, like it's the fundamentals that you need while you're creating work for yourself and for your clients. You know, like don't only make trolls. Like make sure that you also know how this troll or this creature, like how the anatomy works, how the bone structure works, how certain things hold up. And that's like, for instance, like that I put this thing into the slides. Yeah, just to show like that you need to know where you come from as an artist, even though you make fancy creatures or scary stuff the whole time. Like sometimes you need to trigger and to train your stuff. These are the 2 other examples. Like certain elements, like you see, come back: the gold, the reds, the bones, the jewels, and all these little guys live, let's say, in my universe, and I don't have any nightmares. That's a great thing. Maybe because they end up on the screen for some reason. But also I like to be influenced by people or certain artists that have influenced me in the past, but I don't like to copy their work, like there's always certain shapes and flows that are rolling in the back of your head, but rather to, let's say, look up like, how did this artist do it? Like I try to figure it out on my own. These are, let's say, two other examples, like things that always come back, like the skulls and certain repetitions of shapes. And it's always the same. Like it's put in it's like a pretty quick, like I said, for me it's fast work. I sketch it out. I might work on it a day or so, then pick it up a day later to tweak some stuff, maybe change a few proportions, throw it in Keyshot, put some lights on it. It's very simple, and then throw it in Photoshop. The one thing that I don't try to do is, let's say, overpaint my stuff too much, because what I've learned in the past as a concept sculptor, like when I work for certain studios or clients, it's like when you modify your work too much in Photoshop, and let's say the client is happy about a certain look and feel, and they want to have that 3D model getting prepped for production, sometimes it's pretty hard to adjust that Photoshop back to the concept file, I mean, like to the 3D render. So then I rather, let's say, modify or tweak stuff in ZBrush, keep the model as clean as possible, but tweak it a tiny bit more in Photoshop, purely with colors and everything. Like this guy also, very simple. I was thinking about an oracle, like the Oracle of Delphi, like a fortune teller. And then I just start playing with shapes, and like I will show a tiny bit further along the line. There are like certain ways how I build up shapes. And this is practically built up from spheres. Like 9 times out of the 10, when I'm doing my personal stuff, I always start from scratch. I start from a sphere and I just start dragging shapes out and modifying and tweaking them. 2 other ones, always scary stuff. And this, for instance, like something like in between, like I saw the remake of it a few years ago, and I thought like, oh, let's give this guy a shot. So I just did my interpretation, but like I've been influenced by looking at it, but I'm not looking at it as let's say a guideline to create fan art or anything, I still want to do my own twist on the whole thing. Another angle, so that's a nice thing. Always like everyone that's working with 3D knows, like you can give multiple angles, play with the light, give some different interpretations of everything, play with the textures. Yeah, and of course I couldn't resist putting him into the sewer scene. So this is a pretty recent piece that I did, and I was playing with the same thing again. Like trying to figure out like how I build up shapes, I look at forms, I look at structures, and as you can see, like there's always like certain repetition of shapes coming back, like the spirals, like the golds, and well, to be honest, like most of the work that I make it, but it's also kind of throwaway. Sometimes it actually happens that I make something, and 3 months later, like I look up on ArtStation or on another portfolio site where I put my stuff online, and then I correctly forgot about the piece because I threw it out in such a short time, and I'm thinking like, oh yeah, okay, right, I did that already, But there's like a certain list in my head of certain type of shapes or forms or creatures, call it whatever you want, that I want to put out there and create. Like this guy, for instance, like I was reading something about a Japanese water demon because like I like to be inspired by legends and myths and everything. And with this guy, like there's some Xeno stuff in there in the back, but I also want to do my own twist on it, and I play with it, and like I said, it's a sketch. It's a sketch, but it's a sketch that tells me enough about shapes, about language, like how the whole thing is constructed, and it's fun to play with, you know. And the nice thing about doing all these kind of things, like if you do these things long enough as an artist, like eventually people will approach you to do this professionally. So that's kind of like my tip, like that I would give people. Like it's a double-edged sword, because like you kind of shoot yourself in the foot by doing it if it doesn't work. But if it works and people like the things that you do, like in that certain niche, you also get contacted to do those things, you know. So I rather be for myself, be, let's say, a specialist in this genre or this thing that I'm working in, than being, let's say, a generalist that is like a jack of all trades. But that also, of course, depends on every artist. So this, for instance, was like an example of like La Bête de Gérovent. It's like French legend of a monster that lived in the Alps, and or the foothills of the Alps, and actually hunted down people in the 17th century. But I was looking at it, I saw a movie, and I was like, oh, I want to do my try on it. And like it's the same type of thing that comes back. Like I get inspired by seeing these things, but I do my own twist on it. And this, for example, like I saw some images of the Mexican girls of Day of the Dead, like Días de la Muerte, and like that triggers me, like those images that are evocative for me. And like in the next slide, I also can show you the difference between like this and the final and let's say the render, because a lot of people always like, how much post-production do you do on the stuff that you work on? And like this is, for example, like a good example. On the left side, you see a raw render, how I pull it out of Keyshot. And on the right side, you actually see what I do to it. And the only thing that I actually do is like I add gradients and I add highlights, and I might add little tweaks on the flowers to make them like stand out a tiny bit more. But that's practically it, because I tend to respect the model that I'm working with. Like for instance, like this is a clip, and you can see the Photoshop file over here. And when I scroll through it, like when it jumps off and on, like through the different layers, let's see how this works. Like the only thing that I'm actually doing the whole time, see? Like for instance, what I do here is like very simple. I just add a backlight to the whole thing, like just make sure that it stands out of the whole thing. Like I do everything in post-production. And sometimes it even happens I spend more time in posts, like adding little gradients, adding little textures, adding all those little things on top, just to make my render pop, you know, instead of tweaking it. To be honest, it's very fairly like straightforward stuff that I do on these. But for a lot of people, like they always say or ask me like how are you able to pull these things off in Keyshot? But it's very simple. Like you only need a few raw renders, and you're good to go. Like even with a backlight rim or something, like you can even pull the whole thing apart and make it work visually. So let's go through this thing a tiny bit faster just to give you an idea. What I'm actually like doing is like I'm just playing with the opacity of the layers, and to see like, okay, what blends, what doesn't work, how can I get more gold accents in there without, let's say, modifying or tweaking the image too much in my eyes. And that's like how I do all these types of work. So go a bit further. Yeah, and eventually, like, this is the final output that I get, you know? Like, in between, it doesn't make a big difference, but even adding little gradients, for instance, let's say, around the eye sockets, like, that makes sure that this eye pops, and especially, like, when you even do this, like as a concept piece for the director, like, he will read the eyes pretty fast, instead of, like, using the raw render. But yeah, that's kind of on the workflow that I use, like, between raw stuff and let's say the finished post processing that I do on it. This is another example like of a quick sketch, like somebody can approach me with an idea and I get this thing out in a few hours. You know, it's like super straightforward. I start with a sphere. I start pulling out certain shapes. It's not really magic, you know. Like you just need to be inspired by shapes. And the good thing is like when you do this thing for a long time, you build up, say, a mental library of shapes and shape languages, and you can jump through those things pretty fast. And also, like when you're discussing stuff with a director, like you need to know how he thinks and what he likes to see. And with some people, with some directors or producers, like it clicks instantly because you speak the same shape language. With other people, like it can be a problem, and that's sometimes pretty hard to figure out when you're working on projects. But yeah, it's. I haven't. Let's say in the past, I didn't have any, let's say, big issues when I was working on projects, because I also like quite often ask people, like, instead of showing me pictures what they like, I ask them, like, give me reference images of stuff that you don't like. Because for me as a designer, like, it's way more important to figure out what you don't like instead of what you do like, you know? Like somebody can give me an example and show me something and you can create it. It's like, oh yeah, I like it, but it's missing something, but I don't know what. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And then he comes up with a new image, but I rather be, let's say, being influenced by pictures that let's say don't guide me on the direction, then let's say steer me somewhere that they don't really know what they're going for. And the nice thing, of course, like when you're working in 3D, that's something that I discovered over the past 3-4 years. Like you can sculpt something, but it's not tangible, so people can't touch it, people can't see it, and like having conversation pieces on the table, it's a big difference. Even when you're working with a director or something, like having a 3D prototype thing on the table, like that's so important. And for me as an artist, especially also in my personal work, like what I know over the past few years is like I can show a picture to let's say my grandma on a computer screen, and she doesn't really understand what she's looking at. She's looking, oh yeah, pretty picture. But the moment when you put a physical object on the table and you put some light on it, like then a conversation starts, because then they start looking at all the details. They can go around the whole thing, and like this is the next avenue in my eyes for 3D sculptors, or let's say even 3D designers, like being able to give an output, a physical output to the stuff that you create. And for instance, like that's something also that with this guy. This guy already existed in 3D, and then later on, like I looked at the head, I was like, okay, let's chop this thing off and let's 3D print it. And it gives like a total different impression when you see it and when you're able to hold it up into your hand, and even when you present it on a table to somebody. And for me, like even in 3D, when you're working in a production, like some post-production facilities sometimes have the possibility to do rapid prototyping, and for me that's super interesting, you know. Like it's kind of going back to the old days, like you see in the making of episode 1, for instance, like they were still doing stuff in clay, and it's cool to see like those two universes coming together somehow, you know, like the physical or let's say the physical practical with the digital realm. And also like digital sculptors are over time also being appreciated for doing their digital work by the classical artists. And the same thing with this guy. Like I knocked this guy out in a day or so. Even the rendering didn't take up. Thinking like, oh yeah, like this guy would be like super nice if I would 3D print him, and that's what I did, you know. But being able to hold this thing up, and then you can also like later on go to the if you want, like you can start painting up these things. You can even take pictures of this, take it in Photoshop, doing paint overs in it in Photoshop, like texture wise, and see what works fast. And it's sometimes it's just for me personally, it's like way more intuitive to have a physical light on an object than screwing around in 3D space the whole time. So here's another angle. And also like with the high printers, like the super nice thing, of course, is that you can print out stuff on such a level of detail that you don't even see the building lines anymore. Yeah. And then like later on, the whole thing kind of changed up for me, and I was trying new stuff. And this was actually the first piece that I also hand painted, because like I'm also, because I have the history, or let's say kind of a history in classical art, like I want to apply my skill set that I had as a youngster, as a kid, and apply it on my 3D models, 3D printed stuff, and being able to present it, let's say, into the physical world. And this is like, for instance, like a miniature vampire head that I created. But it's super fun to play with, and also like, okay, the only thing that I regret on this whole thing by now is that all those things, of course, take up physical space. And like when I was first working digital for 7-8 years, like everything was on your hard, and now like my whole office space is getting, let's say, jammed with 3D prints and statues and everything, and it just consumes a lot of space, physical space. This is like a good example to see the difference between what I actually have on my screen when I'm sculpting it, holding up the physical piece, 3D printed. I think something like this printed around 16 hours or so. It's printed hollow. And then, of course, let's say the whole finished paint piece. And the nice thing is, like, I also try to figure out like how I can go further as a sculptor, as a designer, and to see like how I can do portraits and everything. And yeah, secretly also, let's say, expanding my hobby. Like I collect one scale figures. I'm not sure that anybody's into that. That's actually looking at the presentation. But it's super nice. Like you can do a head sculpt, print it out on scale, clean it up, and also paint it up, you know. And for instance, like, okay, this is like creature, little Cthulhu thing that I did. And it's like I even did projects like this that, like, I would call them, like I said in the past to some people, like they're 24-hour projects. And that actually means like I have an idea, I sit in front of my computer, I start sculpting for between 6 and 8 hours. I push it to my 3D printer, and I try to get the whole project done. And I'm not talking about paint, of course, but I'm trying to get the whole project done within 24 hours, like from in my head onto the table, like having a physical product, a prototype within 24 hours. And that's like such a liberating feeling, like being able to look at something that you have imagined within that time span, you know? And yeah, it gives you like so much freedom and so much liberation when you have creative ideas. Like you can knock them out. You're not restricted to the whole thing. But of course, yeah, you can only do this if you are able to print it out yourself. Like this was another one that I did, like little fox heads. And again, like inspired by Asian culture. And then like I want to do a fox, added the kanji. And the same thing for this guy. Like this guy was maybe sculpted in a few hours time and printed out. Quite often the printing takes longer eventually than printing out the whole thing. And like with this guy, like I airbrushed it with an airbrush pistol, did some hand painting on it. I added some eyelashes. Like it also doesn't have to be expensive. Like when you're creative, like just look around the house and try to figure out stuff that you can use to generate your art or what you're creating. For instance, the stand on this was like a simple old wooden candelabra that I found. I cut it down, painted it black, added like a little metal rod somewhere else, and yeah, it's it's just being an artist, just do whatever you love, do with a certain passion. And this is, for example, like very simple. I wanted to get my 1/6 scale McCready in my collection, so I sculpted this head in a day and painted it up. And like, as you can see in the photograph, how big the head is. It's like tiny, but also like it's fun to keep yourself busy and also to switch out certain ideas. But yeah, that's kind of the stuff that triggers me as an artist, like switching out ideas, and also especially with the 3D printing thing, like being able to explore the whole thing physically. And of course, a Wolfman. Like I was missing a Wolfman in my collection, so I created a Wolfman. And then like it even starts like after the 3D printing and painting, like I even started modifying those clothes and sewing and then yeah, it's being creative with the things that you have, like the skill set. Even when you're a digital artist, I still believe that you're able to use your skill sets on many different assets or many different aspects, Don't close yourself into that little computer box, but expand. And yeah, like with this guy also, like the Oni hits. I made a render, I did it digitally, I was like, okay, this is looking nice, let's make a 3D print, let's paint it up and try to, let's say, semi-match it with what I sculpted. And it's just fun, like being able to switch it out, like from left to right, or right to left, like even like what I've done in the past for certain clients is, let's say, work on 3D scans. Like 3D scans were created from real statues, but then you put them back into the digital realm. So you can go backward and forward playing with the whole thing. And this is actually one of the biggest projects that I'm still working on, but that's a life-size head that is also 3D printed. Like it's modified in certain parts. And I also hand-painted the whole thing together. But it's like, it's super nice to get out of the 2D aspect and getting into the real 3D thing, Like it's such a big difference. Like even when you would look at something like this in augmented reality or with 3D glasses, like having this thing physical on the table, like this thing is a life-size bust. It's practically 50 centimeters high, and with the right lights on it and everything, like it can be pretty intensive to look at. And that's kind of what I like with the stuff, like it needs to talk on its own. I'll quickly show you also, let's say now, 3 breakdowns, how I kind of work as an artist on professional work and also personal work. So this is like the breakdown of a moth piece that I did. And that was semi-created for a 3D printing tutorial. But what I did was, like, I used the base mesh, a very simple one, modified it. Then I put it up in post. Like, I work in 2 different ways depending on what the output is. But sometimes, like, I purely start working as sculpting in post from the beginning, especially when it's 3D prints. Like, it's more interesting. Like, if it needs to be rigged and everything, yeah, then most of the times the client and everybody is more interested in an A post and, of course, having it posed up. But even when you show or present stuff as concept sketches or concept sculpts, like, you quite often have to pose it up in ZBrush already as a digital sculpture. So in this guy, like, okay, I posed him up. I added some templates, straps on his legs. I roughly sculpted in his pants, his armor, added some details. And then, like at a certain moment, like when you, let's say, put in the big shapes, you blocked in everything. Then it's just like, let's say, crunching time. Like, then you just punch in the details and go further and further and further and refine everything. And then it's, to be honest, then it's drawn by numbers, because the hardest part when I'm working on sculpture is within the first 45 minutes to hour mark. Like, quite often when I'm sculpting something, and even though it's for a client or so, like when I'm not feeling it within that time section, like I just delete it and I restart again. I rather, let's say, give stuff a fresh start than then actually start or let's say keep dabbling and trying to get it better and better without having, let's say, a good gut feeling while you're working on it. Like, sometimes like when you do the wrong sketch, or let's say the wrong block out on paper even, like it's really hard to get everything back into shape. And that's like why for me, let's say the first 45-minute, 2-hour mark is so important as design. Like, and afterwards, like it's tweaking, it's refining, but then it's drawing by numbers. Then you just find some nice music, put it on, and start sculpting and working and working and working. And the same thing for this, like I just tweak the pose a tiny bit, refining, and it's just adding the details, drawing by numbers, you know. I go further and a lot of little technical things that you do to it, like using UVs to apply a certain, let's say, sculpted textures to it. But there's no real magic on it. Like a piece like this, initially, like the beginning, it takes me a day to get to a certain state that I'm happy with. But then I need to crunch on for 5 more days to get into the eventual final sculpts until I get something that I'm happy about. And in the case of this one, like also, because it was like so refined and so detailed, I also engineered the whole thing. And that means that you actually prep and key and make it hollow, like all different sections, and make it ready for 3D prints. And you can see like all the little details on the back, like even like all these nice little details. I'm not sure that you can see my mouse, but even the nice little details on the fabric, they will translate in print. And for instance, like this is the example, like how the output is. And this statue is practically, I would say, 20 centimeters tall or so, roughly. But it's like, yeah, so nice to see all the work that you put into something like this and see it translated, of course, in the end. And even straps on the back, like they have all detailing still in there. And it's super nice, like for instance, like with this guy, I like to play with the light and also like automatically like to get the translucency of the 3D printed material and everything in the whole thing. Yeah, it's kind of exciting. Like it's every time when you're able to pull out something out of the digital realm of print beds and you start cleaning it up and you do the first wash into the because when you print in resin, you have to wash it in isopropanol alcohol, but it's like gooey in the beginning and it's like giving birth to something, because then you start washing it and then like all the details come forward and then you're like, oh, like this is like my nice, pretty little, beautiful creature. So it's super fun to work with. Yeah, this is another breakdown. I get a different approach how I work. Like for instance, like I start with something that I would say is the base of start of a base mesh. But now you can actually see like how I work with the spheres that I told you about. Like I add spheres and I just start dragging those things around. And I pull them out, I add more details. Like that's the great thing on working as a sculptor, or let's say in ZBrush. Like you're so free to play around with shapes and then discover things. And also like when you spin your thing around in 360, that's so important. Like while I'm sculpting, like I don't have to do it anymore because I do it automatically, but you're always checking your silhouette while you're working. You know, like you're spinning it around, you're looking from every angle, top, bottom, left, right, 3/4, and you're trying to read the silhouette, especially at this stage while you're still working on it. And to be honest, like getting from this first image to this first image on the screen, like I know, like I said, I knock it out within the 45 minutes to hour mark, you know. And then I'm saying like, okay, this is what I'm happy with, and stuff still can be tweaked and modified and everything. But yeah, if I don't have a good gut feeling with stuff that I make, my personal stuff especially, like I just toss it away and throw it into the recycle bin. Like I don't have any, to be honest, like I never have any unfinished projects on my hard drive. Like there's no, let's say, folder that's work in progress, and there's stuff in there that's older than a week or so. So yeah, like I'm to be honest, like I'm pretty brutal to my personal work. Like I can create and I can destroy it if I'm not feeling it. Like I toss it away. So as you can see here, I added more details, refined everything, and it's just polishing the whole thing. And these are practically the final steps that I did on it. So I added little spikes on the ring with the last one. And let's see if I can even see if I added more details. I'm not sure, I don't even think so. And this is actually like the final version, but also like even when I'm sketches for everybody or even for myself, like I tend to finish the pieces practically 360. Don't know why, because sometimes you only need a front view for a certain image, but if I have the possibility and I can manage it in my time schedule, like I try to finish off my figures as a 360 round. Like that's the only thing that I would say. Like if you're a concept sculptor or a concept artist using 3D, like you have to be smart with your time. And sometimes, like when a director or producer is let's say in love with a certain angle or one view on your character, it might be more interesting to, let's say, explore everything that is visible from that angle instead of losing time working on the background. But that's my 2 cents on it, you know. And this, for instance, let's say the example, what I do, like on the left, there's the keyshot render, like the raw render pull out of keyshot. It's a simple material pass, nothing special. Then I add the alpha matte on it, so I can key out certain elements if I want. And then I just start modifying and tweaking the colors with gradients, add a little atmosphere, add a little dust, but I'm not, let's say, tweaking or destroying my model. And this is then the final project. So, and the last breakdown I'm going to show you, and that's like a completely different approach. Well, I wouldn't say completely, but that's like starting from scratch, like this dragon. Like I sculpted this thing from scratch with it from a sphere. And to be honest, yeah, it's very simple and straightforward for me. And I can show you in the video. Like I'm going to skip through it, but you have an idea like what I'm working on. So what I'm doing in the beginning is like I'm just pulling out shapes. And I'm already thinking about silhouettes. I'm adding some details. Like for instance, like this thing. Like I'm looking at it from all angles, tweaking it, I'm modifying it, trying to find the right angle. And also like in the beginning, like even when I'm working on this piece, like already have an idea, like how this final dragon will look like, you know, like I have a certain curve, I know it's going to be a bust. I kind of have an idea, like I want to add the spikes on a certain way, I want to add the comb on the back of his head. Like for me, it's very simple. Like even when I'm still, let's say, discovering shapes, like I limit myself to a certain amount of things that I put on the list that I stick to as while I'm designing. And sometimes you have these kind of, let's say, lucky accidents when you move something too far or too close, or you tweak something too hard, or you merge or smooth something too far, too brutal. But to be honest, like even when I'm doing something like this, like it's I wouldn't say it's set in stone, but I clearly have an idea what the output would be. Let's jump a tiny bit further. So the same thing here. Like even little thief that I added, like I just add little spheres in there. And also, like when I'm sculpting, I tend to stick to, I would say, 4 brushes in ZBrush, and they're like pretty basic brushes. They're like a clay brush, an inflate brush, standard brush. Like I try to tell my story with the simplest tools to get my shapes. And like when you open ZBrush, like a million brushes in there, but most of them, in my eyes, are, let's say, specific to do one specific small thing. And as long as you're sketching and blocking out everything, like you're able to pull it off with fairly simple stuff, you know. So let's jump a tiny bit further. So here also like just adding those edges with a slash brush. Like I couldn't do that thing with another brush, so that's like what I'm talking about, like using a specific brush for a specific option. I added the comb, so just playing around, pulling out those shapes. Go a bit further. And then it's just something like going in by hand and drawing in all those little nice hairlines. And it's all like the funny bit is that like when I actually showed this recording to students once, they remarked me and they told me like, yeah, we don't see you doing practically any undos. And I was like, oh, that's funny to realize. So that's also the way that how I work. Like I just keep pushing, keep modifying, keep tweaking. But don't go backwards, practically never, weirdly enough. Okay, sculpting in the scales by hand. Just drawing out patterns. Like that's what I like to do, like for the biggest percentage when I'm working on sculpts, like I like to do everything, if possible, by hand, instead of using the texture maps like from XYZ or something like that. Because I feel more comfortable like working in ZBrush as a sculptor than jumping into other, let's say, software packages to get it to work for me. Because to be honest, like I'm a technical noob. Like I know how to sculpt, I know how to render in KeyShot because it's straightforward and super basic. But don't put me in other 3D packages. Like I know how they work, but to be honest, like I would lose way too much time on rendering and everything, and that's not the stuff that I like to do. And eventually you have like a nice little drawing like this. And it's just, yeah, doing the final tweaks, like just using the move brush, looking at the silhouette a few times again. And then I just kick it to KeyShot. And like this, something like this, then the final image of this guy. So this was kind of, let's say, my presentation in a nutshell, to talk about myself a tiny bit, to talk about my workflow a tiny bit. What you saw was, let's say, only a small selection of the work that I created, but I don't have any big favorites. So if you want to check out more work, you can find my stuff on these links. And if you ever want to ask something or so, I always tell people like, feel free to contact me, because that's the thing that I learned over as an artist. Like there was a moment when I was struggling to get, let's say, answers to some questions, and I contacted people and they never contacted me. And if they would have done it back in the day, they would have made it way easier creatively. And that's why I told myself, like, if somebody contacts me, I try to always get back to them to help them out, you know? But that's just me. I hope it was interesting, and let's see if I can jump back to the live stream.
Thank you very much, Maarten. Thank you very much. It was a great presentation. So many details. I think I'm lost in details now. No, anyway, we have questions from the audience.
Okay.
So the first one, what has been your major source of inspiration as an artist?
Yeah, okay, that's class one. I would say, to be honest, what triggered me as a kid was, of course, movies, right? But as an adult, as an artist, I would say culture, real stuff in the world, like being able to have the possibility to travel, to see how people approach things, how people see myths, legends, even religion. Like, I don't believe in anything, that's me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but still, because I'm surrounded in Belgium, for instance, like by churches and cathedrals and everything, and classical paintings, like sometimes, some way that's trickled into my DNA.
Yeah.
Like, because you see it everywhere. Like you walk 50 meters from my house and I see like little chapel with a little Maria statue in it. Like it's in your face, even though you don't know it.
Yeah.
Subliminal, it's still there,
Yeah.
And that's the thing that triggers me as an artist. Like when I'm walking around in other countries and everything, and seeing stuff from other religions, what other people do, and of course classical art, like having the possibility to go to museums and studying work like a painting from Caravaggio or something, like being able to figure out like how did he light this thing and why does this thing work on me as an artist? Why does this thing trigger me?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Oh, great. Do you retopo and bake down details before the final render? Someone is asking.
No.
Okay.
No. Like, okay, I'll tell you. Like, if I'm in a production and like I'm doing because sometimes it happens that I do the concept sketch.
Yeah.
And I push everything further to the high res model. Then of course, like I discuss it with the in-house production pipeline, like how they would approach the retopo, and quite often like I just give the high res to them, then they do the retopo, but I do the reprojecting, and I also double check like if everything is translated, and then or I give them, let's say, the high res C tool, or I do the bake myself.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like when people hire me as an artist, they quite hire me as for my skill set, and they rather have me to sculpt cool shit for them than to lose time doing the technical stuff that also needs to be done for the pipeline.
Yeah.
But quite often, like when they hire you as an external person, like the budget's limited, and yeah.
Yeah. Okay. More questions. What's your advice for an aspiring digital sculptor located in Belgium? Is it as simple as just making a good portfolio and getting your stuff out there? Question mark.
No, and no. Well, I'm going to be very honest. Like, I'm a digital sculptor in Belgium, and I still have to fight to get the right jobs. Like you're competing not on Belgium level, you're competing on world scope, and to be honest, like you're also competing to third world countries, and that's hard because our rates are higher because of the situation that we live in, right? But as an aspiring artist, I would say like make sure that your fundamentals that I kind of was talking about, anatomy and everything, is at the right place, and also like make sure that you kind of mix and gel with the right 3D sculpting people, Like if you have the possibility to do, for instance, let's say go to a ZBrush Summit or to something that's more sculpture related, try to mingle with those people, because like even that section is like a super tight niche community inside the tight niche 3D community. So I would say, let's say, make a kick-ass portfolio, try to specialize in stuff, try to get your fundamentals there. And also, for me personally, like if you want to stand out as an artist, try to develop your own style. and that's something that you can't do in 2 years' time. You know, that grows. Like I'm sculpting for 10 years or so, and I was discovering my style 5 years ago or so. You know, it grows on you while you're working.
All right. I think the next question is maybe partially answered in your presentation, especially the last bit. But if you create full characters in ZBrush, do you first make a sort of block out, or do you start from a blank project and add the objects you need while sculpting?
I start from a blank. I would say I start from a blank canvas. I block out everything. But what I tend to do, like when you want to present something to a client or something, like just go online, download some assets. Like if it needs to have a sword, don't lose time making a sword. Just stick a sword in there, try to get everything in there, and then start refining, rebuilding stuff, replacing stuff. But like I said, like the most important thing is like to get everything in there, like in the shortest time of space. Tell what you're doing, for me personally. And I also think that's important, like when you're designing, especially when you want to present something to an art director. Like he doesn't want to sit on his ass for 2 days, and then you show something to him and he'll be like, nah, I don't like the proportions. No, you could have shown those proportions after an hour.
True. Yeah. Then about 3D printing, 2 questions. What printers do you use? And is it your own printer, or do you sort that out?
Well, that's a good story. On the printer, I have a Formlabs printer, Form 2. I'm happy with it. But the thing is, like, it's an expensive printer, but the results are super nice. But the good thing is, like, I won it 4 years ago when I won the ZBrush Sculpt Off. So that was actually a gift. But I was like even back then, like I was still thinking, like, should I get a 3D printer or not? My advice would be, like, if you want to invest into a 3D printer, make sure that you do your research on it, especially like with the output that you want to create. And I'm talking about dimensions, and I'm talking about resolution.
Okay.
Because those are two completely different things.
And I think the last question, what would be your favorite company to work for, and what's your dream project?
To be honest, I don't have any.
It's a very quick answer.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
No, sorry, but the thing is, like, if you would have asked me 10 years ago when I started the whole thing, I would have just like instantly have said ILM or something, you know, like one of the top tier, very, very good companies. But over time, like having met a lot of people that are actually working for those companies, like sometimes I don't really have the feeling that I'm always missing out on stuff.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Even though like you can have your name on a movie or on a game, AAA game title, you're still, let's say, this little cog in the whole machinery. And it just depends on what type of artist that you are, you know? Like if you want to stand out for your own stuff or be known for your stuff that you create. So, okay, if they would contact me to do a new Alien redesign for a new Alien film, they can contact me. I would happily take that job on. You know? It doesn't matter which company it is. Okay, I thought.
Awesome. No, great. Many thanks for your time and your talk. I think you inspired a lot of people over here, and we're just very happy that you could be a part of DAC-ANT. Thank you very much.
It was my pleasure. It was my pleasure.